Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight on the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm your host tonight, Melina Weiskup, in for Steve Lance. Here's a look at some of the top stories of today. The biggest ground war in Europe since World War II. How is the U.S. reacting to it? We bring you the latest on the ground and President Biden's latest announcement. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill and former President Trump are warning that Putin's invasion will embolden China to attack Taiwan. Today, Taiwan spotted 9 Chinese warplanes in its air defense zone, just hours after Russia invaded Ukraine. A congressman is calling on President Biden to have a clear action plan to warn China and defend Taiwan in the case of an attack. With Biden now serving as a wartime president, we take a look at his role in this crisis overseas and how the conflict will impact the economy. Russian tanks and troops began rolling into Ukraine early Thursday local time, and Russia has captured Chernobyl. That's just north of Ukraine's capital, Kiev. Fighting is going on in several regions across Ukraine. Russian armed forces advanced from 3 directions, north, south, and east. Russia is launching missile and artillery attacks. Major cities across Ukraine reported large explosions, including ones that landed in residential areas. But Russia claims they are only targeting military installations. Russian defense says they've successfully completed their goals for the day. NATO has taken preventative steps to deter and defend, but the alliance is not sending troops to Ukraine.
There's no troops, NATO troops at all inside Ukraine.
The Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. says they do not expect anyone to fight for them, but they expect all the help and all the response the West can send. Ukrainian officials have shut down air traffic and are calling for NATO to make Ukraine a no-fly zone. On Thursday, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev told Americans to shelter in place as Russia began its invasion. An alert on the embassy's Twitter account says, "Seek cover immediately if you hear a loud explosion or if sirens are activated." And U.S. Embassy operations in Ukraine have been temporarily moved to Poland. And as the invasion plays out, President Biden is rolling out a new series of punishments against Russia. This as more U.S. troops are on the move. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
Accusing Putin of trying to revive the Soviet Union, President Biden on Thursday rolled out a second and larger wave of sanctions to isolate Moscow from the global economy.
We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy.
The new sanctions target 4 more major banks in Russia and several Russian elites. And this time, Russia's defense and high-tech sectors are also targeted. But Biden notably stopped short of sanctioning Russia's energy sector.
We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies.
Today at 5 a.m.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials are urging the U.S. to go further.
We believe all financial institutions should be sanctioned. We believe Russia should be discontinued from SWIFT. We believe Russia should be discontinued from anything that democratic countries allowed them to be part of.
Biden on Thursday defended keeping Russia's access to the SWIFT global payment system, citing ramifications for Europe.
He gave the West will face.
And the reporter pressed Biden, saying that Putin has been so far undeterred by sanctions. Here's his response.
No one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening. It has to show. This is going to take time.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon is sending 7,000 additional U.S. troops to Europe. But Biden reiterated today that they're not going to fight in Ukraine, but are only there to defend our NATO allies. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
U.S. sanctions were imposed on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline on Wednesday. And now 2 major D.C. lobbying firms are following suit and cutting their ties with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The Russian gas company spent millions of dollars lobbying U.S. lawmakers. The Biden administration had waived Trump-era sanctions on the pipeline last year. And after Putin's moves this week, a long list of Western countries have sanctioned Russia, including the U.S. Here to discuss Biden's role and the impact of Russia's invasion, we're happy to bring on Representative Bob Good. Congressman Bob Good from Virginia, it's really great to have you back on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
Of course. So Russia is now at war with Ukraine, and the White House has already imposed a number of heavy economic sanctions to try to deter Putin. Now we know Ukraine is a self-defending country, so our troops are not obligated to go there. So what kind of role, if any, do you think America should play in this war?
Well, the first thing we're reminded of is that the number one responsibility of government is safety and security. When that is threatened or something like this happens, we're reminded on what the number one priority of government is. And it's interesting that Russia did not test the United States during the 4 years of the Trump administration. I'm sure you can remember, as can the viewers, that President Biden bragged during the campaign that Putin was scared to death of him becoming president. He feared President Biden, he claimed. But as we know, he has been wrong on every foreign policy issue for his entire career. And this American weakness is demonstrably dangerous, not just to America, not just to the world generally, but to Europe specifically. President Trump was right that Europe needed to step up, NATO needed to step up and take responsibility for their defense in terms of their investment into their national defense. They, as you know, invest just a fraction of their GDP compared to what we invest in our national defense. And Trump talked about that 5 years ago before he was elected, and during his whole time as president, that didn't happen like it should have. And then you see Putin, who does not fear this president, and you're seeing the result of that on the people of Ukraine and Europe being threatened as well.
So you mentioned that this is a threat to not only Europe, but the rest of the world. So I'm wondering your thoughts on how this might affect our economy.
It's clearly going to affect our economy because this president has, as you know, diminished our ability to be energy independent. He's diminished our own production of our own fuel, our own energy. And so he has increased Russia's influence in Europe and in their production around the world, where there's countries that are more dependent on Russia for vital energy. And as Russia's supplies are depleted, you're going to see a greater impact on the cost of oil around the world. The demand will go up and the supply will go down, and you're going to see further pressure on our gas prices, on our fuel prices, on our heating prices, and it's going to hurt our economy even more.
So I want to ask you your response to a comment made by Senator Lindsey Graham this week. Just yesterday, he warned that if Russia, China, and Iran get their way with their respective goals, the result will be a World War III. Congressman, what do you think about this statement?
We want to have the most powerful, the most feared army in the world, military in the world. We have an administration that thinks that the greatest threat to our country and to our military, the president even himself even said it's climate. And then General Milley and General Austin have said it's racism, white supremacy, nationalism in the ranks. They're probably befuddled that the Russian troops are invading Ukraine without wearing COVID masks, or maybe they haven't discharged all of their military personnel who haven't gotten the vaccine, or they don't have enough diversity in the ranks. This is an administration that does not understand what the purpose of our military is, and we are not feared or respected around the world. We have to recognize the real threat. Mitt Romney was right about this in 2012. These are communist, totalitarian nations that are a threat to world peace. They're a threat to democracy and freedom around the world. Never in the history of the world has the world's superpower used that power for good and not evil like the United States has. We have freed more people, rescued more people, fed more people, ministered to more people, evangelized more people around the world. As America, as the leading, most prosperous, strongest economic and military power in the world, has used it for good. We're seeing what these other nations around the world, what they use power when they think they have, and how they respond to weakness.
Now, one last question before I let you go. I want to ask, what is your perception of Biden's steps leading up to this invasion from Russia? Do you think he acted enough to impose those sanctions? Were the sanctions harsh enough to deter Putin? What are your thoughts on his actions there?
Clearly not. They didn't deter Putin. And, you know, this president doesn't know how to use leverage, hasn't how to keep our enemies guessing what we might do, fearing what we might do. I'll remind folks that the first senior administration official that this administration sent to meet with Moscow, to go to Russia, was John Kerry, the climate czar. How foolish, how feckless we look before nations like China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia when we project this kind of weakness in the things that we're focused on. We don't even understand what our own military is for. We're not feared or respected around the world, and it's very dangerous for America. It's dangerous for Europe, certainly dangerous for Ukraine, and clearly the sanctions did not prevent him from doing this.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman Bob Good from Virginia. Great to have you back.
I mean, you as well. Thank you.
China is now using this as an opportunity to blame America for this chaos. Meanwhile, they're supporting Russia with economic gestures, fueling the flame even more. While in the background, the regime has its eyes on Taiwan. China has supported Russia for weeks, and is now refusing to call Russia's attack an invasion. President Biden today was asked if he was planning to urge China to help isolate Russia, but Biden says he has no plans so far.
Are you urging China to help isolate Russia?
I'm not prepared to comment on that at the moment.
And today, China moved to start importing wheat from Russia, which could provide an economic lifeline, staving off the consequences from those Western sanctions. Just hours after Russian troops moved in to attack Ukraine, Taiwan spotted 9 Chinese aircraft in its air defense zone. They were then warned away. This comes just one day after Chinese officials claimed that Taiwan is not Ukraine because they say it has always been a part of China. Now Taiwan is alert over Beijing's continuous military activities. Here to discuss Russia's invasion as it relates to China, namely how the Chinese Communist Party will take advantage of this issue to continue pushing their own agenda, we have a congressman who's on the Foreign Affairs Committee here to join us. Congressman Steve Chabot from Ohio, thanks for coming on again. It's great to have you back on the show.
Happy to be with you.
Awesome. So China's now refusing to criticize Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Do you think China's happy to see this chaos unfold right now, and do you expect they're taking advantage of it?
Unfortunately, yes. There's no question that this administration, the Biden administration, essentially projected weakness relative to Afghanistan. The bad actors across the globe are taking advantage of that. Putin is, and we saw Putin meet with President Xi. They've been plotting behind the scenes. I think Xi is waiting to see how the United States responds relative to Ukraine in deciding what their next step is going to be relative to Taiwan. So this is a very serious situation, and we need to make sure that our actions, along with our allies, are up to the moment. And unfortunately, if you go back to Afghanistan, it's certainly.
So you mentioned China's looking very closely at this so that they can plan their next move in relation to Taiwan. So former President Trump has just warned that the Chinese regime will invade Taiwan after seeing these Russian troops move into Ukraine. So it seems you agree with this. Now, why do you agree with this?
Well, I happen to be the co-chair of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, so I've been studying this issue for decades now. And we need to make sure that we live up to the Taiwan Relations Act, that we actually make sure that Taiwan has the arms that they need to defend themselves. And we also need to change the current policy about strategic ambiguity, where China doesn't know what we would do if they attack Taiwan. We need to have strategic clarity so they know that if they attack Taiwan, the United States and our allies will be there. It's much less likely that they would take military action against Taiwan if PRC realizes that.
So from what I'm hearing from you, we don't have a clear plan in place or clear threats to China that kind of shows them how we will respond in the case that they invade Taiwan. What should the administration do, or how should they speak to China about this? How should they warn China?
The PRC, President Xi, should have absolutely no question in his mind that if they attack Taiwan, the United States will be there. It's much less likely that they'll actually take that military step and attack Taiwan if they know that we and our allies will be there. So this strategic ambiguity, not letting China know what we would do, is outdated. That might have worked when their military forces, especially their Navy, was much weaker than the United States. They have invested a tremendous amount of money in their military in recent years, and they actually have a larger Navy than the United States does now. So it's absolutely critical that they realize if they attack, that will end up in serious military confrontation with the United States. They don't want that. We ought to make it clear, like Ronald Reagan did. His policies were essentially peace through strength. What, unfortunately, the Biden administration has been projecting is weakness. And the bad actors across the globe, including Putin and President Xi and the Iranians and North Korea, see that. And we're seeing what's happening right now in Ukraine.
Now, I want to go back to how China is responding to the Russia situation. It seems China's fueling the flame a little bit. Now, China's latest move is allowing wheat imports from Russia, which will certainly give Russia a hand up economically. Now, what do you think about this?
Well, we want to isolate Russia as much as possible now. We need not just half-measure sanctions, but really tough sanctions, which would essentially destroy the ruble, destroy their economy, essentially destroy their energy sector if they proceed with this. China is backing them up, so it makes it a lot tougher for us to actually put pressure on Putin to back down. So China is not being at all helpful, but that's not unexpected because the two chief rivals on the globe right now, the bad actors, the worst of the bad actors, are Putin and Xi, Russia and China.
Now, last question for you. I want to zero in on a more domestic issue relating to China. So the Department of Justice yesterday canceled a Trump-era program that was meant to crack down on China's undercover operations to steal our intellectual property. Now, why do you think the Biden administration has reversed this tough on China policy?
That makes no sense. And we need to be extremely tough on China. They have been ripping off our technology. They have been stealing our intellectual property for years, for decades now. And the tougher we are with them, the less likely that is to continue. And that actually has not only international impact, but it also has the impact on American jobs. When companies have their intellectual property, their secrets stolen by China, that means the jobs go away here in the United States. So there's a reason for the American public and our workers to care about this as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Congressman Steve Chabot from Ohio.
Thank you.
Republican lawmakers are taking issue with the sale of a Canadian lithium company to China. The GOP members Representative Waltz, Elise Stefanik, and Lance Gooden have sent a concerned letter to President Biden's cabinet about the sale. Canada and the U.S. recently created a joint plan to strengthen mineral supply chains in the wake of aggressive competition from China. The sale of the Canadian company Lithium to China's Zijin Mining Group took place with the approval of the Canadian government. The move has come as an unwelcome surprise to American lawmakers. In the letter, the three Republicans call the sale highly concerning, and House Representative Waltz says that Canada is not understanding the threat. Most states have started to end their mask mandates, and soon the CDC may update its guidance. A truckers' convoy starts its journey from California toward the nation's capital. During a send-off rally, truckers set the record straight about who they are and what they hope to achieve. Former President Trump hosts a GOP candidate forum at Mar-a-Lago. They discussed how to take back Congress in the midterm elections. Hello and welcome back to NTD's Capitol Report. As the midterm elections are heating up, former President Trump hosted a GOP candidate forum at Mar-a-Lago on Wednesday. Some prominent members of Congress and candidates in the upcoming election joined this event, which Trump called the Take Back Congress Candidate Forum. During the forum, Trump criticized Biden's handling of the Ukraine crisis. He said President Putin is pretty smart by taking over a country for $2 worth of sanctions. He added that the attack would have never happened during his presidency. Right now, there's a division among the GOP over how to handle the Ukraine crisis. The CDC is expected to announce new guidance on the COVID-19 restrictions, including mask mandates. This comes as the Omicron surge dies down and most states have started to end indoor mask mandates. The CDC's new metrics may be available as soon as Friday, according to a CNN report. But the CDC still suggests that people should wear masks if they live in counties with substantial or high levels of COVID-19 transmission. The new guidance will change how to assess community levels of disease. Instead of looking at case numbers alone, the CDC will now look at deaths, hospitalizations, and emergency room visits. This will reduce the number of counties that are currently listed at the highest levels of transmission. Meanwhile, our daily COVID deaths on average are falling, but still remain high, with about 1,900 reported on Monday. A dozen U.S. Air Force officers have filed a lawsuit against the federal government after the military denied their religious exemptions to the mandatory COVID vaccine. The officers accused the Air Force of using a double standard when approving the requests. The Air Force, according to the lawsuit filed last week, had allowed more than 3,000 medical and administrative exemptions, but only 9 religious exemptions. The lawsuit names Air Force security Frank Kendall as one of the defendants. Truckers from the People's Convoy got rolling toward the nation's capital Wednesday after a kickoff rally with hundreds of supporters in attendance in California. The truckers are bringing a message to the government leaders in Washington: end the COVID-19 national emergency. They're calling to open up the country and end the mandates. Several doctors joined the truckers on stage during the rally, supporting a call to end vaccine mandates. Brian Brass, one of the convoy organizers, said this issue affects everyone, including future generations.
It's about my future grandchildren. It's about our families. It's about our country. It's about letting our government know that you work for us.
According to their website, People's Convoy includes people from all different races and walks of life. D.C. residents may be getting $100 a month to ride the metro. The D.C. Council is considering giving away surplus funds to encourage using the public transit system. The $100 credit would go to those already enrolled with a Metro card and have a balance. The D.C. Council hopes to promote a greener commute by getting cars off the road and getting D.C. residents back into the Metro more often. The idea is that D.C. Metro service would need to earn riders by improving its service, rather than receiving money directly from the city. And that's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. Thank you for tuning in from Washington, D.C. I'm Melina Weiskup, and we'll see you next time.